Night Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, the secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Hey everybody, welcome to Night Vision. Hope you got your libation, your coffee, your glass of wine, nice big bottle of water, whatever you need to have a comfortable experience tonight, because we're going to go down a little bit of a scary road. But I hope everybody's doing well this week. Personally, I've been really captivated by the volcano in La Palma, Spain. I don't know if any of you have been keeping track of that, but it's just an incredible sight. And I know there's a lot of volcanoes going off right now, so I'm not sure what's going on with that. We might even get James to give us a little opinion on that stuff here as well. But primarily, we're going to be talking about vampires. Are they real? Were they real? Do they exist? Are they walking among us? We want to know. Also, why are they so popular in today's pop culture? I've got a couple of young kids in the house, and they love vampires. Anything with fangs on it, or lips dripping blood, or they think it's so. They call it cute. So we'll see what's up with all that stuff. But anyway, I wanted to send out my best wishes to the people of La Palma, and I hope everyone is safe. I know there's a lot of damage going on, but I have been informed by my brilliant friend and cohort, James Martin, that the Spanish government will well take care of the people. One thing I am a little bit concerned about is there are a lot of dogs that are missing and running in packs and things like that. They're trying to find them. The dogs are, most likely hiding and trying to get in a cool place. But if there are a lot of groups that are helping out there, if anybody feels so inclined, please reach out to those people that are trying to help others there, and also certainly our beloved little furry friends. There's a guy that I've come to know, at least by sight now, on YouTube, and his channel is called Bushcraft Bear, and he's giving reports early in the day and then late in the evening after dark about all the recent goings on in La Palma. So if you have anything to offer or to share, I would suggest reaching out to him. He seems like a really good guy. Anyway, enough about La Palma, even though it's well on my mind. But tonight, we're going to be talking about vampires, and vampires all the way from present all the way back as early as we can go to the first references of blood-sucking creatures in history. So why don't we introduce James, our historian, bring him back on. Hey!
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are.
Yeah, good. Well, good morning to you over there in France, across the pond. However many 6,000 miles away from where I'm sitting right now, I guess, in Los Angeles on the west coast of the United States. But, we've been chit-chatting a bit over the week, going through some research and just some ideas about what we want to share tonight. But, I'd like to just start out, if I could, with why do you think we have such a fascination with vampires? I mean, as I said, I hesitate to say it. I don't know if I'm going to get censored or anything, but vampires are kind of sexy, at least in a lot of people's eyes. I mean, there's the sucking on the neck and the taking you away into an eternal life. There's something. Is that what it is? Or is it just that we can suspend our imagination or our belief, rather, and go off on a fantasy? What is it, do you think?
I think it's a mixture of many things, actually. I mean, the way that we see vampires has changed over time. So we used to be frightened of the dead returning, but now we have this idea of, no, these are tortured creatures, so we feel sympathy. These are creatures that have been around for centuries. They're undying and what have you. They live in such horrible conditions, whether they're in a graveyard or, wherever they are. So we've got a bit of sympathy. But then we've got this idea of being taken away and taken away from our existence into something else, something different. And really, I think the reason that we think today vampires are something cool yet gory, we're sort of frightened, but are we? I think all of that is to do with, well, our question: what happens after we die? And our fear of that uncertainty means that, well, if we can suspend it, we don't have to worry about that question. And just this week, I was reading an article about just this, about the notion that it might be possible in the next 50 to 100 years to cheat death. And, do we then have actual vampires who would need various transfusions and all of this? And I thought, oh, well, I'm going to bring this up on the show.
That
but yeah,
bizarre. Yeah, but by the same token that we say, oh, it's take me away to this eternal life and all this, it might sound kind of attractive. But by the same token, when you see stories of vampires, as you said, in some ways we get sympathetic to them because they always seem sad. They always seem kind of like, oh, I'm stuck in this. It's not, not of my own doing. And I have to live this way. I don't want to kill people or make people into vampires, but I must, so in some ways, it would seem like that would be a terribly unattractive lifestyle, to know that you're trapped in the world and can't leave. Because I guess you can't die unless somebody stakes you in the heart or something like that.
Or, well, again, how do you kill vampires? That's changed over time as well. Now, some vampires, if they go out during the day, they just glisten. Some like eating garlic or like being around us, things like this.
Well, as I told you before the show, I am fully prepared for tonight's subject matter. I have my Celtic cross that I'm wearing, and I have my garlic. So all vampires, stay away from this house tonight. There we go.
You're making garlic bread, I assume.
Yeah.
For later on. Yeah.
I almost did that. I almost just brought a piece of garlic bread in and ate it on camera, but I thought the real garlics might be more fascinating.
And here I am undefended. The only thing I've got.
Yeah, you don't have a cross. You don't have any holy water.
I've got my holy water. It's mixed with coffee, and
I've got my holy coffee. But
I think
I was kind of flabbergasted. Maybe we'll. I kind of thought about starting with pop culture and going all the way back, but I'm thinking now maybe we should just start from the beginning, because I can't get out of my mind what you told me just before the show about the earliest reference that you saw to such creatures, because it goes so far back, it's just almost unfathomable. So can you explain, where were vampires found originally, and in what cultures do they seem to be prevailing even today?
Well, firstly, I haven't been able to find many cultures that don't have some sort of vampiric creature. They're everywhere, ranging from the Australian Aborigines through to Chinese culture, India especially, Persia, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and of course, as time moved on, in the United States too. Plenty of accounts of vampiric creatures, and even in Native American culture too. So everywhere there is. It's a bit like the flood myth, a bit like ghosts, a bit like other paranormal activity. It's everywhere. It's around the planet. But I think just to start off with, just for two terms. I mean, you've got firstly the vampire, who traditionally is sort of a supernatural character, inhuman, perhaps a little bit more like a demon or a monster. And if you take that idea, then you've got Lilith. And actually, you've got from ancient Persia and ancient India, perhaps the earliest documentation. There were pottery, bits of pottery, that depict creatures withdrawing the blood or the life force from an individual. You've also got some, perhaps, on some beakers, perhaps the notion of the psychic vampire, but we can talk about that a little later.
I know some of those.
I've been in a meeting with a few of them this week.
Yeah, I think we all know people like that. But yeah, we can get into that a little bit later. But, now, so you're saying that earliest on, the vampire creatures were more like demon-like instead of like people who were once human and got bitten by another vampire, and then they still look human. So they looked something other than human at that time.
So again, the depictions of early, and we're talking perhaps 2,000 to 3,000, 4,000 BC. The depictions are of humans, animals. Something perverse as time moved on. It wasn't just animals that could be vampires, and we're not talking about a werewolf. We're talking about shapeshifters as well. But fruits and vegetables were defined in some instances as being vampiric. The watermelon, the pumpkin, turnips were described as being vampiric. I don't know. It could be the effect that it might have on people. I mean, certainly, if you wanted to look at a sort of medical idea, you could perhaps suggest that rabies. This you're bitten by a creature, and perhaps rabies is really what we're talking about, or pernicious anemia. Can't stop bleeding, hemophilia, things like this. But no, they were like us, but just the separation of the two types of vampires. As I say, you've got the supernatural, demonic creatures, not necessarily evil. That comes later with Christianity. But you've got these depictions of people from outside of town. Now, if you imagine what it's like in the, 1000 BC, what's outside of town is frightening. You've got wolves, you've got all sorts of creatures, you've got the forests and the woods. Safety's really in the small village. But the second type I just wanted to refer to is called the Revenant. And this is a separate creature. The Revenant is a human who returns back to the world of the living after having died. And so, as I say, you've got these two different types of vampire sort of coexisting with each other for quite some time, actually. And I actually think, we'll get on to pop culture, but you sort of have the confusion of the two. You've got the demon and you've got the action films and the gore. And then you've got the returned back to the dead, or perhaps didn't die, or had to go through some experience in order to come back.
Yeah, I think, there is somewhat a violent theme to some of the vampire films, but it's different than, battle scenes and guns firing off and, total gore. It's usually, more psychological violence in some ways, with the fear of physical violence. So I think that may appeal to, some audiences more than, car crashes and guns shooting off and that sort of thing. But I know.
Well, anyway,
go ahead.
I was just going to say the psychology is really interesting because, of course, anyone can be turned into a vampire.
That's right. Yeah.
This isn't just something that, it's not like an army where there's the army, over there, or there's a murderer, or there's whatever else. This could be your loved one turned. I think some people, not for me, but some people like zombies for that same reason.
Right.
But with the vampire, it could be your loved one. And again, the same
what
notion
that presents.
right. But this was the earliest depictions. I mean, you go back to Babylonia, they had Lilitu, as I mentioned, Lilith is this sort of the first demon, I think maybe in the Abrahamic religions. And you've got all of this, and then, of course, in ancient Egypt, you've got some depictions, and in Roman times, I mean, what I was just saying before about this notion of out of town, it's worth noting that certainly in ancient Rome they did this, but criminals, vagabonds, things like this were often buried or cremated or remains put whichever way outside of town, usually, not always, but usually at a crossroads. So yeah, and I'm not suggesting that's the origin of the cross, by the way, but I'm just saying this idea of your loved ones, the criminal element, all of this coming back from the outside into, that's really one of these. And I think the psychology behind it as well, Renee, is really that idea of that fear of the unknown coming in. And I think that's still with us today.
Yeah. Speaking of crossroads, you kind of hear that in a lot of different areas, references to crossroads. I know I'm trying to recall the particular story, but I know that there's a well-known story about the devil at the crossroads, going out there, and you can meet up with the devil and make a deal with him at the crossroads. But I also wonder if burying people at a crossroads is not some sort of attempt at protection, because it's the symbol of the cross, which of course is commonly known to be used against vampires and maybe other demonic creatures, I'm sure, demons, vampires, and the like. So I wonder if that's the thought behind that, is that there's some sort of measure of protection for loved ones by burying them at that crossroads or at a crossroads.
Well, certainly the earliest accounts that I've read, I mean, we're talking, ancient Egyptian times, Sumer, Babylonian, things like this. There was a real fear, and certainly Lilitu, for example, was this demon, if you want to call it anything, who would come and take the blood, not of adults, but of children. You had, again, this idea of, some sort of entity. And what Christianity does later is, of course, you've got this dualistic argument, at least initially, that there's God and there's the angels, but equally you need to have the same opposite. In other words, as above, so below. And this is where our poor vampire is now no longer, some sort of creature that's taking babies or things from outside, but he's now given the title of demon, and not quite a demon either, a sort of half demon. And so what you had, by the Roman period and then afterwards, is anyone who had a deformity, anyone who had especially sharp teeth or any poor teeth. And by the way, listeners, I know that in the United States you like to take the mickey out of British teeth, but I assure you we're not all vampires. But
okay, first of all, I think we need to explain what taking the mickey is. Because that's not a common term in the United States. I hang around with too many bloody Brits, though, not to know what taking the mickey is. It means like, oh, I was going to say the word I was thinking of, taking the, it's like taking a jab at you, basically. Taking the mickey. Anyway, so yeah, we do take the mickey over, Austin Powers style teeth and that sort of thing. But, we don't all have great teeth here on this side of the pond either, but it is a kind of a funny.
Well, Austin Powers, if he was around in the pre-Roman period, might have been considered to be a vampire. Not that any of the Austin Powers films suck or anything like that. But yeah, anyone with a even a slight deformity or something like this might, in fact, be of alert to people that if they pass or even if they don't, they might be the undead. They could return. And again, this is where when you start looking at things like this, the deformity, you end up seeing depictions of witches being deformed. Yes. But our vampire too, who's now a demon, is now perhaps got some deformity or just sharp teeth. Suddenly, perhaps a demon.
Yeah, unfortunately, in society throughout time, even today, if you're a little different or, you suffer the consequences of that through no fault of your own. But yeah, I could see how that people would think that, especially back then. But you're, a lot of people equate vampires with, Vlad the Impaler or Dracula. And, but there was a lot going on before his time, but certainly in modern times, I think we all kind of look to him as sort of the beginning. Why do you think that is?
Well, I was just going to mention just very quickly that the one thing that is in common and what separates demons and witches and all of this from our vampire is throughout is this notion of blood. And we associate blood with life. So, as I say, when we get through the idea of vampires being demonic, and in the Christian world, that's true. There are some, shouldn't forget to mention, for example, in India, where actually a vampire was one of the Hindu gods, perversely. But what begins to happen is that various splits in the churches in Western Europe. And so the Orthodox Church separates from the Catholic Church, etc., etc. What that does is it means that you have different traditions that begin to form. So we're very familiar with the Eastern European, the so-called Slavic vampire. And the Slavic vampire, whatever you think when you hear the word vampire, that's probably it. And the earliest depiction of those comes from the 9th century. I was reading a Viking runestone, in fact, that was explaining how to ward off against a vampire. And they used to put it into the dead's mouths. But in Eastern Europe, where you have this tradition of the shapeshifter, the werewolf, you have things like this. When we're talking about the Eastern Europe, the Slavic vampire, we're talking about from Russia to Bulgaria, Serbia to Poland, maybe a bit of Germany, and of course our very famous Romania and Transylvania. But just to put some context in before we get to Vlad, who I think has a bit of a poor history when it comes to vampires, but a worse history when you actually look at him.
And what he really did. Yeah.
And what he really did. And I've got a picture to show those who are watching later, just as an example. From 1488, there was a quite brutal explanation as to what he was up to. But first, as I've said, you've got in Eastern Europe, you've got this idea of if you've got a vampire, you might just have someone who was born with sharp teeth or even a tail. It could be conceived on a particular day of the year, might have died irregularly, might have been excommunicated, could have been buried improperly. There are lots of ideas, and preventative measures for those in Eastern Europe would be things like putting a crucifix on a coffin. Now, not many people, the earlier you go, were buried in coffins, but putting some sort of crucifix, putting blocks under the chin, and the idea behind this was to stop the vampire nibbling on their own shroud. Nailing the coffins down, and this interesting bit of the psychology behind it, putting poppy seeds on top of the grave, because it was believed that vampires had OCD, and so they would count the roots and the number of seeds that had fallen into the ground.
Oh my gosh.
And of course, the most successful protection for our Eastern European vampire would be removing some teeth and jamming a stone into the deceased's mouth.
So what you're saying is, if you have a loved one that has passed, this is how to protect them from being attacked and becoming a vampire.
Yeah. And
so you don't do that to a vampire, you do it to someone in order for them not to be attacked or become a vampire. Got it. And
I have to say, and this is an issue.
It worked because we don't see that many vampires.
Well, we've got to be very sensitive about different cultures. So I don't want anyone thinking, how barbaric or anything. But there are still examples of that practice going on today in Romania and surrounding countries, some of which have hit headlines, I know, around the world as this is barbaric. But there is
it's just I would imagine, I mean, it really doesn't sound terrible, a terrible thing to do. And I would imagine if it's been done for centuries, that it's almost done, just like we have some traditions that we always do with our dead and, in our ceremonies and rituals and things like that, which we do almost by rote or automatically. And I would think in some ways that, they're not doing that with the intention of, oh, my relative's going to become a vampire. They're doing it because it's always been done.
Yeah, that's it. And, again, especially in times, I mean, there's some, I can't get away from some of the comments that have just come through around UFOs and all the rest of it. I just want to tackle this one head on. Firstly, where you've got, how do you know a vampire's in town? Well, it's not just because everyone smells of garlic now and all the rest of it. There are very serious warning signs. So the first one to mention is cattle mutilation or the death of cattle. And there are examples of this dating right the way back to the 9th, 10th century of the sudden death of cattle, that's the new one, cattle, being exsanguinated, in other words, having no blood. Anything that affected livestock. So, it's not just cattle, it's sheep, relatives.
So what are you saying that these cattle mutilations you're talking about occurred? I mean, I'm well familiar with those, like 70s, 80s, 90s. Are you talking about a long time ago?
Yeah, I'm referring directly to one thing that I was looking at from around about 1080 AD or 1080 or.
They had mutilated cows?
Yeah.
Sanguinated?
Yeah, and it wasn't just in Eastern Europe also. The same warning signs were found in Dark Age and medieval Western Europe too.
Oh my gosh.
But this wasn't seen as we perhaps would see it in terms of things like the cattle mutilation and all of this, and our connection to UFOs. Really, back then, there's a vampire in town. And what also began to happen is, on some instances, they exhumed relatives, loved ones, people like this. Anyone who perhaps was excommunicated, who was perhaps I don't know, perhaps had funny teeth, tail, that kind of stuff, as we've just mentioned. And what they would notice is that some bodies were very lifelike. It appeared that fingernails and hair had grown. The body was swollen, as if just recently eaten, and there might be blood on the mouth. And this led to another form of protection, which was beheading. The corpse or decapitating. I can't say the word. Decapitating. There we go. The body, and in some instances, at the funeral. Can you imagine that? In today's society, just going through the curtain, and then there's all of this.
I think we had a little bit of that going on here in the late 1800s or maybe early 1900s, when there was a vampire scare in the colonies. I think they were beheading some of the deceased, and and they had to do some excavation fairly recently of those graves for some other reason, totally unconnected. But there was a gentleman who was researching into those vampire stories. There's a famous story of a woman called Mercy Brown that was said to be a vampire. But I think all those cases back at that particular time were roughly associated with what they used to call consumption or tuberculosis. And it was just an illness, and for some reason people equated it with vampirism. But they were digging up those graves for other reasons. I forgot why they needed to do that, but they did find some that had been decapitated for sure. Kind of interesting. But not that long ago.
Again, these, you've got vampire scares, I think the last one I read about was 2014. This isn't a phenomena that, comes from the Victorian period. But I just want to get on to your original question, which was Vlad and what's going on. So, decapitating, there we go. And for those watching, you can see what a lovely mustache our friend Vlad had.
He looks like my relative that was the necromancer in England.
But perhaps it is. Perhaps the necromancer was, in fact, a vampire bringing the dead back to life.
Daddy!
There we go. Is this that, Renee, was that a world exclusive?
Yeah. I'm in the vampire line here.
Well, firstly, let's have a look at Transylvania, which is one of your states, isn't it, in the US? Oh, no, it's Pennsylvania, never mind.
Something like that.
But what's going on in Transylvania? Well, the Carpathian Mountains are rugged, they're raw, you confront nature. And it was believed that, I'm going to mispronounce this, but Skolmans, a magic school, essentially, had developed in the medieval period.
Hogwarts.
And was... Say that again, sorry?
Was it Hogwarts?
It could very well have been sort of medieval Harry Potter and the Cauldron of Blood. But this magic school was thought to be a devil worshipping school, and the area is very difficult to live in. It's very difficult to control. But if you can control it, it forms a natural defense. And so some empires, countries, territories, etc., were very interested in taking the area because it would form essentially a natural boundary. One such empire was the Ottomans. Now, the belief system in the area, you had 3 different types of vampires. You had the Strigoi, and these were troubled souls who would rise from the dead. They could be invisible, resemble a loved one, or they could be in some horrendous, monstrous form. They drain life to keep themselves sustained through blood, and had red hair, indigo eyes, and it was thought they had 2 hearts. Renee, what colour were your eyes?
Not indigo.
Not indigo. But they were blamed for disease, pestilence, famine, and in some instances it was thought that they were responsible for things like the cattle mutilation, cattle death, etc., etc.
I'm just curious. I mean, I know this is not what we're talking about, but do you have an idea of what causes that, the cattle mutilations? I mean, I actually, my company did a documentary at one time on them called The Cattle Files. And we felt there was a lot of military, interference there. But that wouldn't have been the case back then. So how did those cattle get completely drained of all their blood?
That I can't answer. I don't know. Then again, though, you've got bovine tuberculosis. You've got various diseases, your foot and mouth disease, things like this. There are diseases that affect animals, and did the people who were writing about the cattle and the death and all of that, were they actually there, or did they fit it into the belief system of the time? I don't know, but I will say this: cattle mutilation is a very real phenomena, and I agree. Military, for this period, though, I don't know.
But it seems as though you don't really hear. It seems like we had a spate, of cattle mutilations. I would say more like the 90s, the 80s and 90s. And then you don't hear that much about them anymore. So it does kind of make me think maybe someone was doing some kind of experimentation or something like that. And then whatever project that was is now over. But it threw me off when you said that there were cattle mutilations in ancient times. I mean, that's just crazy. I had never, ever heard that. So it makes me rethink the whole cattle mutilation thing now.
Well, I would
Linda Moulton Howe on here. Explain it all to us. She probably knows about those early cattle mutilations, I'm sure.
I think if there's anyone who's going to know anything about cattle mutilation, Linda's the person.
That's it.
But generally speaking, our paranormal pantheon of today hasn't changed too much. Yeah, we couple it with technology, I suppose, but at the end of the day, a lot of the ideas of ghosts have been around for millennia. Vampires, you name it. So it's nothing much new. I just wanted to mention the three types of vampires. So that our strigoi, living human beings, could be them. They would have magical powers. So the strigoi could be troubled soul or in fact be alive. You've got the moroi, which are exclusive to Romania, and they really are a monster. And so it was basically this vampire was someone who was born to a pure mum and dad, but they were killed or died before being baptized.
Oh.
And then you've got the Prikoliki or Prikolisi, which are essentially werewolves in life and then vampires when they die. So you don't have to. You don't have to do a Twilight and choose which team. No, you've got the best of all worlds.
Both worlds.
With that.
Oh my goodness.
But for Vlad, so we've mentioned decapitation.
How did Vlad get equated with, the king of all vampires?
I think that comes, later with a bit of inspiration. I mean, firstly, his, he and his dad, etc., had the name that gave us our most famous vampire. Okay, he was called Dracula. Mm-hmm. Now let's split this. So if you're listening and you want to look at the heavens, then I would suggest that you look for the constellation of Draco.
Mm-hmm.
And all it means is dragon. And the Iya, as in Dracula, just means the son of. So Dracula means the son of a dragon.
Oh, wow.
So that's the first thing to say. So,
is there any connection, and I know this is off the wall, maybe a dumb question, but is there any connection with this family and the so-called Dragon Court?
I believe so, yes. As for more on that, I would need to go back. I remember having a look at some of this, and there were various, I don't know, a sort of Eastern Masonic idea actually relating to the dragon. But yes, there is a connection with Vlad. His name was actually Dracula was more of a nickname. The Romanians know him as Vlad Tepes.
Right.
But he was certainly made a little bit more famous because of Bram Stoker's Dracula. But if you're thinking that Vlad Dracul or Vlad Tepes, depending on where you are, he got a nickname after he died, and that was Vlad the Impaler.
Yes, well.
And I just want to say at the outset, there is no connection from his time to vampires.
At his time, during his
time.
At
his time, absolutely right. No connection. There was no suggestion that he was a vampire. So there we go. However, he was known for, and I want to make this a thing, he wanted stabby time.
Stabby time.
Stabby time. And what he liked to do is stab people through the head. He was a leader of Wallachia, now part of Romania, and he was fiercely defending his country, his countrymen and women from the Ottoman Empire. And he was brutal in his methods. So he was leader, deposed, leader, deposed, leader. And What he did is he would capture Ottoman soldiers and he would put them into a human kettle. Their head would appear above ground and beneath, full of water, in maybe some sort of ceramic, and they would boil and they would scream. He would decapitate them. And here's an image, and this is from just slightly after his time, from 1488. But here we go.
Oh, geez.
And this is a wood depiction, and it is known that Vlad, so for people who are watching this broadcast, that's our friend Vlad, wearing what looks a little bit like a wizard's hat.
Yeah.
And he's dining amongst the dead and amongst the those who'd been...
his victims impaled on the fence, the sharp... Oh.
And there are many depictions... there are many depictions from the time with subtle variations on that image.
Yes.
So our friend Vlad had a bloodlust for sure. And I think when you are an author, perhaps, you're writing about Transylvania and you're looking at the history, you cannot escape Vlad. And he's got a very interesting name, hasn't he? The son of the dragon.
Yes.
Of Draco and all of this. But we'll talk a little bit later about Bram Stoker and where he got his inspiration from and what changed the modern notion of a vampire.
Absolutely. But now, when did that idea grab hold that Vlad, was associated with vampires? How much later after his death was that? Do you know?
You probably have met people who were alive when that happened.
Really? Was that recent?
Really recent, yes.
Oh my goodness.
So Bram Stoker writes Dracula in 1899, and it's really after that there is an association. There may have been some thoughts a little earlier, but not in popular culture.
Wow. Oh, I had no idea. I mean, we really haven't heard the real story.
Well, history's softened up the image of Vlad. He's our Dracula of today. The reality of the situation, what he actually did. I mean, let me give you another figure about him. He beheaded and spiked and dined amongst 40 to 100,000 people. You just try and figure that one out.
Wow. I mean, it wasn't, I mean, you would have to work day and night to kill that many people.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in those days, because you didn't have like weapons of mass destruction or anything. You had to kill them one at a time.
But to the Ottomans who were invading, they'd think twice.
Well,
I mean, it would send shivers up the spines of those who were, stepping foot in his territory, perhaps, and that was the point.
I wouldn't want to go anywhere near it.
But for me, I think he's got off lightly. I think his history's softened him up a little. He was really quite brutal.
Yeah, I think by associating him, with Dracula the vampire and that sort of thing has sort of endeared him in some ways to people. When, if people thought about what he really did, they wouldn't be so quick to think he was such an okay guy. But yeah, can you imagine living near that castle and seeing those people impaled on the fence? And it was, all kinds of people, men and women, or their children as well.
Mm-hmm. Not so much children. Remember, these are soldiers who are invading. But
right, yeah.
If
it was only the invaders that he was killing.
Yeah, then again, the sheer number of people that he killed, you can't rule out that, you know, perhaps families followed their partners into battle, you know, that kind of stuff, you know, in camps. So you can't rule out the whole babies on spikes, women, children, that kind of stuff.
Kill them all, the devil will know his own.
Pretty much.
I suppose.
Well, it's worthwhile noting that the term vampire, perhaps, and there's some debate here as to where it actually comes from. There's a belief that it comes from Russia, from very ancient times, I suppose. You're looking at when the Norse were moving into Russia and founding that country, perhaps from around that time. But certainly the word itself, vampire, went through France before it came into English. So it is vampire. Mm-hmm. However, it was spelt with a D and a H. So vampire in the Slavic tongue. And then it becomes vampire, or vampire as we know it in French. And the first, or at least the earliest account that I can find is from Arnold Pohl in 1732. And that's the first reference I can find. And he was in Germany, I think, at the time. But that's the first time I can find the name vampire being in anything published in the English language.
You know, one thing, going back a little bit, you know, we were talking about the idea of incubus and succubus, or succubi or incubi in ancient times. I mean, well, through current times, there's stories of these creatures coming and, you know, sucking out the life force of you as you sleep. You know, some of it has been associated with that idea of sleep paralysis, which we talked about, and the old hag syndrome, you know, of this old woman, you know, being on top of you and sucking the life out of you. When was the earliest reference to those sorts of creatures?
I get with so we were talking about this the other night, I think.
Again?
We're going all the way back again.
Oh my God.
These are, so this was, you know, really when we're looking at, you know, the origins of vampires, there's a lot of different creatures in ancient times that did different things, and they sort of merge, you know, medieval period into what we would think of today's vampire. But incubi and succubi, it was the explanation for what perhaps we would call sleep paralysis, perhaps actually some visitation, but no, you're going right the way back. You know, and there were various explanations. You know, you in fact were being visited by something perhaps vampiric, and it was, you know, the reason that you couldn't move is because your life force was you had caught them middle of the act of you being drained in this way. Yeah. In fact, it's worth noting that in Egypt, this is from a poll from 2018, that in Egypt, sleep paralysis is rejected as the explanation. Instead, it is the incubi and succubi that we talk about, you know, the so-called old hag. There's all sorts of mentions going all the way back.
Yeah, I mean, I've known people that have, you know, claim to have that experience, and they say that, you know, that it just makes them completely and utterly, literally drained of their energy, exhausted. So they wake up the next day to, you know, go to work or do what they have to do, and they just barely move around because, you know, their energy's been stolen. But and then that sort of goes back also to the idea that we brought up earlier of psychic vampirism. And I think, you know, I mean, for me, it's illustrated best that, we all know people who, when they walk into the room, it's just like a burst of sunshine and everyone's happy to see them and they sort of lift spirits. But then by the same token, you know people that when they walk in, it's like they suck all the air out of the room. It's like they've got a negative vibe or a negative energy about them. And, they just drain you. And I've had friends that actually I considered, a little psychic vampiric. But, I'd get on the phone with them and they would just criticize other people and, just complain and all this. And by the time I would get off the phone, I would just feel so low, that I finally realized I got to cut this person out because this is not good for me, and I think, thoughts are power, words are power, and there's definitely an energy that's a power. And I do believe in the power of good and evil. I do believe there are forces, dark forces and light forces out there. I can't explain it. But.
Just on this, just quickly, because I know we've got a break coming up, but I've been teaching and representing people, blah, 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 via Zoom. And yes, I find it draining. So there's two things about Zoom. One, it's created by vampires because after even an hour, I'm drained. And secondly, just for those paranormal enthusiasts who are listening, I'm convinced that Zoom is the modern day seance. Tony, can you hear us?
Yeah.
We can't hear you. Can you say something? There we go.
There you go. Well, we're going to get it more into vampires and a little bit more into the pop culture when we get back on the other side. Hang in there with us. We'll be right back. Hang in there with us. We'll be right back. Well, maybe we're not going to take a break. Shall we forge ahead?
Well, we can forge ahead if we're.
So anyway, I did want to get into a little bit of the pop culture of vampires and how they're so popular. I was doing some research today, and I found an article on the top 24 most important vampire shows. And I thought I had a feeling I was going to know what was going to be number one. But I was right. It actually ends up being Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I think that is because, for one thing, the main character is the character who's getting rid of the vampires, not the vampire. And I think, it's so far reaching because of, the ability of media today to reach, the entire world. Whereas, we were talking about even old movies back in the day, they weren't as widely disseminated. So naturally, I would think, you could have more influence if you're reaching a bigger audience. And then I know there's a whole cosplay aspect to the Buffy the Vampire Slayer. People would dress up in those different character roles. But since Buffy, there's been a whole slew of new shows that have come out that feature vampires and are on the vampire theme. And it's just interesting that it has become like a cottage industry. The more I got into looking at things, the more I see, vampire related these days and how popular they are. And I guess I missed the boat on that. But I do remember when I was a kid, I did used to either vampire was one of my big top characters on Halloween. And it was either a vampire or Cleopatra because I had black hair. So I would go for those, one of those two. But I do remember one time when I was a young adult and my boyfriend happened to be a major rock and roll star, which I'm not going to say who it was, but I went down to the studio as they were recording, and he totally did not know who I was. He got so scared he ran out of the studio because I ran up to him with my cape and my teeth, and I used to love doing that. But anyhow, I wonder, about this whole cottage industry. You have the Vampire Diaries, you have the Twilight series, and what do you think that's all about? Or were you into any of those?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny, really, because what you've got is most vampires were depicted as being women in ancient times. And what Buffy did was, it broke that type cast, if you will, of, Dracula, you've got Christopher Lee, and you've got then Gary Oldman, and you've got a lot of male characters. But yeah, absolutely, I used to love Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I personally have to say, I absolutely adore some of the films. Into the Vampire, absolutely one of my favorite films. But there we go. I've just been informed, everyone, it's break time now.
Bathroom break, everybody. 3 minutes. Take care. We'll see you on the other side.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
I don't want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about it.
Families don't have to talk about everything, but they should talk about how to plan for an emergency. Get tips and resources to make your family's emergency plan.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button. So just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
Hey, welcome back to Night Vision. I'm your host, Renee Barnett, and with me is my colleague, my cohort, my friend, and my relative, James Martin.
Yeah, I'm not the necromancer.
And necromancer, James Martin. James and I, James mostly, has been doing a lot of genealogy work, and we've discovered that our bloodlines cross over and back, I don't know how many times, but I was thinking about that earlier today, and I was wondering, what's the most recent crossover that we have, do you think? What decade or century was that?
Oh, we're in the 1700s, I think 1683.
That's the most recent cross of our lines? That's quite a ways back there.
Not for me. I studied Rome, so that's relatively recent to what I'm used to looking at, to be honest. But it's not bad. not that long ago.
Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. Yeah. If any of you guys are interested in genealogy, James is a master at it. I mean, he can just work it up so quickly. I mean, not in huge detail, but you should get in touch with James at info@newrennies.org if you would like a session with him on your own genealogy. It's less expensive than you might think. In fact, it's not that expensive at all. And it's certainly rewarding. I mean, I'm a person that really wasn't that interested in my ancestry because I thought, it's just going to be a bunch of unknown people anyway. And so I'm not going to be able to find anything about their personal lives or anything like that. But surprisingly enough, I've had some surprises with people that I've come to know that I'm related to that were quite well known in history, and others who weren't so well known, but I have been able to find a little bit about them. So, and believe it or not, some of my most interesting relatives are not the most famous, like the necromancer I mentioned. I just love that whole idea because, for one thing, I doubt if he really was. I think they were just name calling back then a lot of times. But he was supposed to have been, practicing magic and necromancy, not to mention the I word, which with his sister-in-law, not with his sister. But anyhow, there you go. Interesting stuff. But have you run across any vampires in either one of our lines?
Well, the problem with the vampires is, you have to put on, on your family tree, born 150 AD to present, and it just sort of interrupts the flow. It's less like a family tree; it's more like a stump if you're looking at vampiric family trees. To be fair.
Oh, I see. Well, hopefully we can uncover some of that. That would be very interesting. I mean, the more scandalous, the better, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to my family tree. Much more interesting.
I discovered a witch in mine, and it was a he, a sorcerer, and all of this.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, good. That's good. Absolutely. Now, the other thing I did want to mention before we get back into the subject matter too deeply is I did want to invite people to visit our website, newrennies.org. It's under construction. Also, we're taking submissions. If anyone has an article, if they want to send it to us, or pictures at info@newrennies.org, go ahead and send that over to us. And if it fits our format, if it fits the subject matter, you might see it on our website. And also would like to remind people, because I got a call about this just tonight. I was so excited. Someone saying, I heard Bloodline was available again, but I didn't get the link. Where is it? So I sent it to him right away. It was one of our viewers from Australia. So thank you, Bo, for reaching out. And I hope you enjoy seeing the movie again, which I think he saw it years and years ago. But it's as you know, James, it hasn't been available for viewing for about 10 years. So I've just cracked it back out again, and hopefully people will enjoy it, and it'll spark even further controversy than it did the first time around. And we've also got, of course, the Priory of Zion dossiers available on our website, which is a collection of correspondence and documents over a period of a few years between our team that produced the film Bloodline and Nicholas Haywood, who purports to be a representative of the Priory of Zion, the secret society, which is supposed to be protecting the secrets of the bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. So those are quite interesting. There are some documents in there that have some notations and stamps that are quite interesting that you might be interested in if you're into that sort of thing. Anyway, that's enough of my sales pitch. But I do encourage you to check in with James if you're interested at all in your family tree, because I've just gotten so enthralled with it that I can't stop. So I have a feeling you might be the same way. But anyhow, so from Bram, Vlad the Impaler, to what we see as Dracula today, do you think that largely came from Bram Stoker's adaptation of the character, or was it?
Well, I think it comes from a period just before. I'm one of my favourite people in history is Voltaire. And I just wanted to read out something from Voltaire just to give you an idea. This is in the early 1700s that he says, "What, vampires in our 18th century? Well, yes, in Poland, Hungary, Silesia, Moravia, Austria, and Lorraine. But there's no talk of vampires in London or Paris. No, the true bloodsuckers don't live in cemeteries. They prefer great palaces."
That may still be true.
It could very well be. Certainly explains a few things, but just to give a little bit of a shout out to someone who is writing in the very early 1800s. This is a time you've got the Enlightenment just beforehand, and you've got the real obsession with blood and this bloodline idea, just tagging on from the film, Renee. And, you know, can we take blood out of the system and can we put it back in? You have obsessions with British royal families around bloodlines, and there's this notion of blood. I mean, it's not just in the kings and queens of the time. We still undertake some pretty vampiric practices, you know, biting into the skin of Christ and then drinking blood, for example. Sounds a little vampiric, but it's really
Christ and the blood of Christ. Yeah. But oops, James is frozen. There you go. Now you're back.
I'm back.
There you go.
It's if you cast your mind to a novelist, Mary Shelley.
Oh yes.
Who writes a superb book, Frankenstein, in 1816, around this period. There's another author who really doesn't go, isn't a household name, and he's John William Polidori. And he wrote a book. There was a bit of a contest in 1816. Mary Shelley wins it, in essence. But again, one of Byron's friends, John William Polidori, wrote a book called The Vampire. And it was published in 1819. And it was the story of a young Englishman who's called Aubrey, who meets a mysterious lord from an unknown background. He's part of London society. They have a friendship. This mysterious lord seduces women, dies, but makes Aubrey, this character, promise to keep quiet on the nature of his death, and then he comes back to remind of the oath. And I'm not going to spoil the ending, but what do you think happens? What that story did is really inspired. He essentially creates, is the origin point of our vampire being a monster, but also a romantic figure. And it's without doubt that story inspired Bram Stoker. And you know, Bram Stoker is writing in a period, you've had the Industrial Revolution, is still ongoing. There's rapid changes in society. And there isn't, there's a romanticism about what's gone on in the past. And that really is the sort of origin point in the background for our for our Dracula, as we know. There are other examples of books and sort of penny dreadfuls, and these were sort of very short stories paid for a penny that were very popular at the time, covering vampires. There was Varney the Vampire, for example. There's a book called Camilla, or Carmilla, Carmilla, which was one of the
Parker Bowles. Then
not quite, although she does live in a palace. No, this was a story. If you imagine from the Victorian idea, this was a story about lesbianism. Essentially, this was a sort of LGBT, if you will, vampire story. A woman who uses her influence to take over another woman. It may have been very controversial at the time, but our vampire has essentially morphed again. We're not dealing with the monster who you rip the teeth out with anymore. Over the Victorian period, you've got again the obsession. Just having a blood transfusion make you a vampire. You have these scientific questions. You've got haemophilia prevalent in royal families. The bloodlines not really being that far apart. And so our Victorian vampire is seductive. They're interested in sex, dangerous liaison, perhaps. There's a certain amount of gender fluidity, if you will. And you've got essentially the old, this very ancient creature confronting a new society. And that's the basis, really, that we see with Dracula.
Today.
Yes, and let's have a look. So, certainly, Dracula is based upon, or at least takes some inspiration from the name Son of the Dragon from our Vlad, who we were looking at just before the break. And a bit about Stoker. Firstly, he was born in Clontarf, which is a famous battle site, but is in Dublin in Ireland in 1857, so right in the middle of the Victorian period. He was interested and was researching quite a lot of Eastern European myths and folklore, especially around Transylvania. So I mentioned, some magic traditions, things like this. One book, now wait for this, this is a very long title, but it inspired Stoker when he was writing Dracula. One book that he used was An Account of the Principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia, an extraordinary and shocking history of a great berserker called Prince Dracula. That was just the name of a book title, by the way. And he also read The History and Superstitions of Romantic Romania. So with all of this, it should be said that he's reading about a place. He doesn't, so far as I know, ever step foot in Romania. It's very difficult to get to. There aren't railways there. You're still very much horse and cart travel. Whilst the railways are building in Britain, they're not everywhere. So it's very common for people to read about other cultures, not necessarily visit, or if they do end up on a tour of Europe, it's unlikely to end up in Transylvania, especially in the 1800s. There we go.
If this isn't throwing you off your roll here, what about the association with bats? When did it become a thing that, vampires turned into bats?
Again, this comes back to ancient times where you've got the idea of a vampire can be a wolf, it can be any animal. You've got the this is one of the shape-shifting traditions of vampires from around the world. In fact, that's a common theme, other than the taking of blood. So the association with creatures that are awake at night time when the vampire is around, they're the ones that essentially vampires can quite often morph into. So wolves, bats, trying to think of other nocturnal creatures. I haven't seen any hedgehog vampires, but hey. But yeah, that's the idea. It's those creatures that are...
But the bad thing, is the thing that stuck. When we think of wolves, we might think of werewolves, but we don't really think of vampires. But now, everyone is familiar. You see it on, Halloween decorations, the little vampire bat in the old movies. You see people like Bela Lugosi, turning into a bat and flying out the window. You also see him, kind of in a sexy pose there with, which I'm assuming this is for the movie poster, to draw people in with him biting the neck of the beautiful girl. But certainly, the bat thing has stuck, at least on this side of the pond. You see bats, you can always think of vampires.
Well, if you think about the vampire bat,
Yes.
they do sustain themselves on drinking blood.
Yeah,
and also
fangs, and
they've got the fangs, and you've got the notion of the cape of the the old style lord and count. Well, that's a bat. Just to lighten the mood a little on vampire bats, one of my favorite jokes is there were two bats, really, really hungry, starving, sat atop a tower, and they can see in the distance there seems to be a light and a bit of activity. One of them says to the other, "Right, I'm so hungry, I'll go and see if there's anything there." A few hours later, he flies back and his face is covered in blood. He says, "Where did you get the meal?" And he says, "Well, do you see that church steeple over there?" He goes, "Yeah." He says, "Well, I didn't."
That's a good one. That's funny.
But yeah,
our jokes.
Really, really bad jokes. But that association with the animals and these creatures of the night really explode with Dracula. I mean, just to give you an idea as to how absolutely groundbreaking Dracula was when it was written. I mean, firstly, it's a history book based loosely on a character that really existed, Vlad. This creature is tormented by the loss of by the loss of a partner, and it's this quest to try and restore a bit of romance and life to this very lonely figure, really. And coupled with that, what you've also got is some real life depictions of real life places in Britain. So you have the idea of bringing old soil into the new world, and you have Dracula being able to sail over the seas, something that vampires couldn't do. They couldn't cross water at one stage. But now, well, he's still in his own native land because he's got some soil. And once he's fed on everyone on the ship crashes into Whitby. And you can go to Whitby. It's a lovely seaside town, really picturesque.
Some of our listeners and viewers commenting on Whitby the whole time here. So I have to admit, I don't know about Whitby, so I'm very interested to hear what that's all about.
Whitby is very famous for Scampi. As I say, it's a seaside town, but you've got the ruins of an abbey as depicted in Dracula. It's a very old town. If anyone's been to York, it's strange. You sort of park at the top of a cliff and then have to go down into this town. Very picturesque. very old place. Wheat or Wheatersby comes from the Norse. It's a Norse founded town, very ancient, and of course it's the subject of Dracula. Yeah,
And it's
Dracula
in
wants to
Yorkshire?
spy.
It's in
And
Yorkshire.
it's in Yorkshire, yes.
Oh, wow. I knew nothing of that, and I was there. I'll have to go see Whitby sometime.
Yeah, and right now at this time of the year, there's all sorts of Halloween and Dracula tours going on. If you don't mind wrapping up very warm,
Yeah.
it can be a real treat. You've got hot chocolate, coffee, and then you've got treacle apples and treacle tart and all of this.
We don't know what treacle is, but go ahead.
Oh, well, fair enough. Well, we're going to keep it if you don't know what treacle is. But not for sharing that one, I'm afraid.
Okay.
But yeah, let's just consider the impact Dracula had. Dracula was the second best-selling book at the time, just behind the Bible. It's never been out of print. It's inspired 700 plus films from around the world. It's captivated. The basis of the story finds itself in Japan. It finds itself in Africa. It finds itself in South America. It finds itself everywhere, all tying in with that vampiric folklore in each culture. And it's a superb book. It's been translated into God knows how many languages. And without it, we wouldn't have our Buffy the Vampire Slayer. We wouldn't have anything like that. Now, it's worthwhile mentioning the Nosferatu, which...
Oh, yes.
I've always fancied the idea that Nosferatu, it sort of breaks down into Latin. You've got nos, our, fair, iron, and then a bit of two. So, essentially the person who's extracting iron from you. Actually, Nosferatu is a Romanian term, and it roughly means, the sort of person from the outside, or the interloper, that kind of stuff.
The normal.
Yeah, the normal.
No.
So Nosferatu is the Romanian word for vampire, oddly enough. But you've got all of these inspirations, and what we begin to see with Dracula is that change from this monster into this tortured soul. And like Frankenstein, just as with Dracula, who is the real monster there?
That's true. That's true. You do have a sympathy for the monster because he didn't ask to be constructed.
Well, this is it. And, you've got, again, the characters in Dracula, you've got a lawyer, and it's very difficult to feel sympathy for the lawyer, Jonathan Harker, really. You've got, Dracula, the son of the dragon. You've got, Mina Harker and her friend Lucy Westenra. You've got all of these, you've got victims, and you've also got a bit of not just the notion of this strange world, this Romania, but you've also got a Dutch doctor in Van Helsing, who himself has ended up inspiring others to write about his background and how did he get into all of this. And so you cross, this book has got the mixture of medical science, history, geography, folklore, and it covers all the things that, if you're a historian, you like it because there's a bit of history in it, perhaps. If you really into the paranormal, you've got it all.
Yeah.
It really is a superb book.
Yeah.
And it changes the way that we look at the vampire.
I want to read that other book you were mentioning that was written at the time that Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, The Vampire and what was his name again? I'm going to look for that.
He's writing in the part of, there's a bit of a contest in 1819, and the name of the author, who has just escaped me, you're not talking about Carmilla, are you? No.
No.
You're talking about John William Polidori. So John space William space Polidori, Polidori.
Yeah, okay, got it. Yeah, I'm going to look for that and look it up and see if there's there might be even portions of it, if not all of it, available online in some library archive or something. But that sounds really interesting. I'd like to read it. You know, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, it's funny that even it came up because there was a movie with Kenneth Branagh in 1994 called Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and it premiered here in Los Angeles. And I got to go to the premiere, and I was escorted by a gentleman named Forrest Ackerman, who's known certainly around Hollywood and around certain fans as Mr. Monster. And he, he's gone now, but he had a house in Hollywood Hills. And, you know, someone should have just turned that into a museum after he was gone, because he had all these old movie props. He had a life-size statue of Bela Lugosi, and he was very close friends with Bela Lugosi. So he had all this Dracula stuff in his house and everything, but it was really cool. But he was definitely into the vampire scene, along with all other monsters of that sort of era and ilk. But it was just funny because, you know, that was my sort of first exposure, really, outside of just old movies, you know, to the whole vampire thing, was going to Forey's house and seeing all that material. And there's so much there. I'm sure he had old books and scripts and everything else, but that was a Mary Shelley connection to the whole thing.
Well, and I have to recommend, you know, read it. It's not a novel, Frankenstein. It's a collection of letters and diaries, and it's very well put together. Well recommend it. And again, Dracula's superb. What begins to happen over time, though, is our modern notion of the vampire. There's a bit of a split, really, from the 1960s, 70s, I would suggest, where you have the romantic vampire, you know, ignoring the Hammer House of Horror, the Christopher Lee, the dodgy sets, you know, the sort of overacting stuff from that. But you end up with a sort of split where we retain some of the things that our ancestors were perhaps frightened of in terms of the folklore. You know, you end up with gore films, and you end up with the monstrous side of things. So we see the film Underworld would be an example, or Blade, or something like this, where it's not about the romance of a vampire. It's an action film with vampires in it. But then you have the sort of romantic, the tragedy, where I have to say it, and I'll say it again. Anne Rice's vampire series is utterly superb, and by far, not that I'm a huge fan of Tom Cruise, but my absolute favorite film is An Interview with the Vampire, because you end up, and certainly is true in the books, but you end up seeing how these creatures started, how they ended up developing, and interviewing a vampire and listening to the stories and the torture and all of that. It's very seductive. Yeah, very seductive to read. And I suppose that
I did read those. I'm trying to remember. Was it the 90s when those came out, or I can't remember exactly, but I did read them. I read Interview with the Vampire, and then I read Lestat, and I think there might have been more, but I didn't read those. But they were really good. I mean, scary, but as you said, something very seductive about them, and I think that sort of set the tone going forward a bit for some of the other vampire things that we've seen.
I think so. I mean, here's what we have. I mean, we've spoke about the incubus, succubus, Lilith, going back in time, but vampires are part and parcel of our folklore and our tradition, and we have this. It's not just that you're reading about a vampire or watching a film. It's the idea that as a human, you can be turned against your will or willingly into something else, something that separates you. And I sort of think that I'd be interested to find out for listeners what your favorite vampire series or film is. But I'm going to say something that might offend those who like the Marvel. For me, vampires are the original superheroes. You know, the characteristics of strength, sometimes magical powers. They do the right thing, perhaps sometimes, or other times no. And I think that the notion of a superhuman in this way has absolutely influenced the development of even Marvel, who also, and DC Comics did do some vampire stuff as well. But Interview the Vampire, it's not just the strength, it's not just the magical powers, the sleeping in coffins, the sunlight, and all of the things that we're used to. I'm not sure about garlic. I think they're fine with garlic in that series. But what we have is the sexually ambiguous vampire. The vampire who doesn't see sexual orientation, but is just seductive and can seduce you irrespective of whether you're male, female, doesn't matter. And it's that idea as well.
It's because he can put a spell on you.
Could very well. And then, well, we've got the romantic stuff. Then we have what I call the genre of teenagers save the planet. High school, it's such a horrible place, and it's all serious, but don't worry, after school you can go and kill the undead. I don't know what the moral of that story is, but Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
I'm laughing. Oh, it went away. Wait a minute, there it is. I was laughing at one of our viewers here, Steve. He says his favorite vampire movie has to be Dracula Dead and Loving It with Leslie Nielsen. Now, I have not seen that movie, but if it's anything like the Airplane movies with Leslie Nielsen, I got to see it because he was funny.
Steve, just a shout out to you. Absolutely, the best scene in that film is where Dracula slips up on bat droppings. See, practical. If you're going to have lots of bats around you, you're going to need to clean up.
Oh, that's so true. That is so true.
Superb film with Mel Brooks. The great Mel
was
Brooks.
it a Mel Brooks film?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, then it's got to be hilarious. But I'd be interesting to see what everybody's favorite vampire show or movie. Could be a TV series, could be a movie. But someone definitely is into the Twilight Saga movies. Thomas here, and then Interview with the Vampire. Of course, Thomas is mentioning that one as well. But yeah, the Interview with the Vampire kind of changed things, I think, a little bit in terms of the modern concept and the pop culture surrounding vampires. It made them cute and cool.
It really was a sort of modern day Dracula, though. Again, you've got the history. Again, you've got the folklore. Again, you've got the magic, the superhero, the tragedy. You've got all of this. And then, yeah, it wasn't too long afterwards. I think the film was remade into a TV series, or maybe the other way around, but Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And then it's not too much longer after that you end up with various other series. So I will admit, listeners, I'm not sure why I watched this, but True Blood. I mean, it's got fairies, it's got all of this, and you think, what am I watching? But it asked the question, and here is the question: do vampires walk amongst us? And well, it's possible, isn't it?
I think
mutated DNA.
Now, Steve says the best scene in Dracula Dead and Loving It is when Leslie Nielsen comes out of the casket and bangs his head on the chandelier. So you probably remember that scene. I have yet to see it, so I'm gonna have a look. But yeah, I mean, you and others are mentioning vampire films that in shows that I have forgotten about. It's like there are so many. I was thinking of some of the main ones. The Vampire Diaries. I forgot about True Blood. That's definitely one. But
this is it. The what it says is our folklore is still very much alive and well, and we still, I don't think there's a vampire film or TV production that's not going on at the minute. You're not that far away. You're a few months away at any one point, I think, from a film about a vampire or a book about a vampire or something like that. And it really does intrigue us. And in fact, it was vampires that led me to the Rennes-le-Chateau mystery, because you've got the computer games too, which for me, my first introduction to the whole Rennes-le-Chateau mystery was in a computer game and a graphic novel by Jane Jensen called, I would forget it, Gabriel Knight 3, which incorporated the mystery of Rennes-le-Chateau and vampires, two of my favorite things all rolled into one. So we have computer games also around vampires and taking over, and battling them or becoming one. And I'm sure it won't be too long before we've got these virtual headsets where we can actually become a vampire, albeit not in real life.
No, virtually a vampire, virtual vampirism. Oh my goodness. Claudine says that her grandfather said his friend became a werewolf right in front of him. He ran a lot. I'm assuming when she's saying he ran a lot, that must have been her grandfather who ran if he saw someone turning into a werewolf. I mean, there certainly are a lot of stories about shapeshifters, and I definitely want to get into that more. In fact, I've invited someone that's an expert in shapeshifters to come on, and I'm waiting to hear back, so I'll let you guys know. But there's certainly a lot of, the whole thing with the bat, shape-shifting into a person and back and that sort of thing. But when I grew up, where I grew up, I should say, in Oklahoma, there were lots of stories of shapeshifters. And people just sort of like accepted it as though, well, of course, he turned into a bird, and there'd be stories of, you seeing someone walking down the road, you're driving in your car and you pass them. And then in a mile or so down the road, they're already there before you. And the idea was that, they were able to change into a bird and fly. So that's a heavy Native American influence there in Oklahoma, of course. And so
again, we're coming back to the different cultures. They're absolutely everywhere. You just reminded me again. We're talking from the 9th century, where you've got the succubus that we were talking about before, or succubare in Latin, which roughly means something like to be underneath, or something like that. They were explained and they were looked at in a way that they were demonic. They had demonic bat-like wings. In some depictions, just it's a Slavic reference. Again, you've got from the Jewish traditions. I've mentioned Lilith. Again, you've got this idea. In fact, it's not just sleep paralysis. The idea of wet dreams and things like this were also considered to have been a visitation by some sort of demon. All sorts of things like this. And I think, if you go further backwards in time, you get the succubi, you get all of this. This idea that, it's a really romantic account that is a Norse account, albeit it's from a little later than when it proposed to happened. But this idea that you've got they fell in love with the vampire, if you will, and just couldn't stop thinking about them, even though they'd never seen this creature. Again, you've got you want to look at the things like the shapeshifters. You go to ancient Greece, where you've got blood and ritualistic sacrifice, where blood is exsanguinated. I mean, here's another one from the Roman period. How I've forgotten this when I was writing my notes up. But you've got the Mithraic tradition, where we don't know much about the ins and outs of Mithras, but what we do know is one of the notions was to exsanguinate a bull, that is to say, to remove its blood, and an initiate of Mithras would lie in a rudimentary coffin, I guess, beneath that bull, drown essentially in the blood and be reborn into the cult. Is very vampiric when you look at it. And again, you've got the idea of not just the psychic vampires, but also those who can do the opposite, those who can give life as much as take it away. With all of this, though, I mean, I can't re-emphasize the notion of the shapeshifter. And there is, when you look at the modern cattle mutilation, things like this, it's usually coincided with some sort of story of some wolf or some sort of creature that disappears or shapeshifts or anything like that. Now, I don't know whether that's from folklore, and whether that's actually going on. But if it is, it might lead to some credence that there's a little bit of the world that we still don't know the answer to. And perhaps these elements of folklore were written over thousands of years to explain what it was that people were seeing.
Yeah. Claudine is saying, I feel people who are energy vampires. It seems they take good energy and leave bad energy. We were just talking about that a little earlier. Certainly, we've all known people like that, Claudine. And it's, thoughts and words are energy. I think you get back a lot of what you put out. And if you're putting out negativity, not a good thing. But certainly if you're around someone who's constantly being negative and you feel like they're draining your energy, if they want to keep that up, then I suggest find another friend, because it's not good for you. It's not good for your health. It's not good for your mental health, your attitude, your spirit, because I like to align myself with people that when I talk to them, I actually feel better about myself. Present company excluded, of course, James. No.
I was just thinking, why do you speak to me then?
No, you are very supportive, regardless of the fact that we cap on each other as often as possible. But I know where your heart is, and I know how you are with other people, and I know that you're a good person and you put out good stuff. So that's why you're still around.
Well, sorry,
about me, but
I didn't get the name of the who was it that was talking about energy?
Claudine. It was Claudine.
Claudine. Well, Claudine, some of the other remedies to prevent so-called psychic vampires and vampires from affecting you from around town, from around the period of history and time, is use mustard seeds. Mustard seeds on the roof of a house or around the house can ward off any negativity, apparently. And also the usual salt, iron, things like this. Vampires don't seem to like iron spikes, but then again, I've always wondered about that.
What about this?
Well, garlic was the idea was not to have it round your neck or on your head, but to put it in your socks.
And I would assume that very thing is the genesis of the whole stinky feet thing.
It could very well be. It could just be that you've got smelly feet as well, though.
Oh, that could be it.
But yes, I always wondered about the, your a stake through the heart is the way to kill a vampire. Well, it'd kill most things, I think. So be careful with things like this Halloween. Well, just sort of come to a bit of a conclusion, something like that. What we now have is roasted garlic's the best. I don't know if you're referring for anti-vampires.
Well, I have just received a text from one of my kids saying, bringing you tacos. So I'm quite excited.
Do they do delivery? They
are this time.
But what we've got with the modern day vampire, and the vampire will carry on evolving. Who knows where the vampire ends up in the future? It will probably still have the same themes. But we've even made it kid friendly, haven't we? I was just reminded by the Count from Sesame Street, Count Duckula.
Right.
Dark shadows and things like that.
Well, we have a breakfast cereal here, or we did. I don't know if it's still Count Chocula. Chocolate breakfast cereal with this funny cartoon vampire on the front.
I do feel sorry, though, for, it's like famous people in history. Caesar is famous for dog food, or certainly is in Europe. Julius Caesar. Now, we've got Vlad the Impaler, who sort of folklore has evolved him into cereal. Poor thing.
Yeah. That's, I guess that's where a lot of people end up, a lot of athletes and stars. I even have a box of cereal somewhere that I kept that had, like a wrapper. It was Biggie Smalls, who's now deceased. He was murdered. But the Notorious B.I.G. with guns and everything on the cover, I'm going like, what? That's a kid's cereal? It was funny. I forgot the name of it, but I did manage to grab a box of it from a television set I was working on. But anyhow, yeah, this has been a wild subject, a little departure from our usual fare. Although history is history, there's history to everything. And, Frankenberry. That's right.
Well,
cereals.
I've got to do this. I promised my mother that I would, around favourite vampire films and all of this. And I think if I say it, everyone will go, oh, yes, but The Lost Boys. That introduced me to so much of
Lost Boys. Oh, that's right.
The Doors, things like this. And
Yeah.
sorry for those who are
about
just
Lost
about to eat
Boys.
Chinese food, by the way. If you've watched that film, you know what I'm on about.
Oh, it's been so long since I've seen it because that was many years ago. Lost Boys. Oh, yeah. With the Coreys. Corey Feldman, Corey Haim, who's, of course, no longer with us. That was good. Was that the one with Gary Busey in it?
No, I don't. No, Kiefer Sutherland was in that.
Oh, yeah, Kiefer Sutherland was in that. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, lots of people. I'm going to have to rewatch that. That has been, you guys are reminding me of things that I forgot about long ago.
But it's such a cool film. And here's the thing. We're watching films and TV series today in the same way that people in history used to tell stories about vampires and the outside world and the shapeshifters. And we enjoy it just as much today. I wonder back in, Persia, where you had some examples of vampires, whether or not people were telling their favorite story. Who knows? But it's so much fun, and yeah, it's been a departure from our normal. But you can probably tell I absolutely adore vampires. I don't really know why, but it's my go-to sort of thing for Halloween.
I have no idea about that, but. Everybody, please remember to shoot us a line over at info@newrennies.org. If you want to talk to James about your genealogy, or if you have a question, or especially if you have a subject matter that you'd like for us to cover here, we'd be happy to get your suggestions. We want to give you what you want. So please let us know the types of things that you'd like to see from us going forward. And thank you, James. Now, I know you're abandoning me because you're going on the road. And so you won't be here next week, but I'm going to try to deliver a halfway decent show anyway in your absence. Hopefully something really spooky and weird, since it's going to be just 2 days before Halloween. And you have a good trip and a safe trip. And everyone out there, have a good, safe week and a happy Halloween, although I'll see you before then.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.